Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to this Mobile Ecosystem Forum webinar on mobile IoT. Are you cybersecurity ready? I'm Andrew Parkin-White. I'm an advisor to MEF on mobile IoT. And mobile IoT is one of MEF's work programs that also includes messaging, personal data, payments, VAS, and advertising. For those of you that don't know, MEF is a global trade body that promotes industry opportunities and champions issues affecting the mobile ecosystem and represents its stakeholders. MEF offers a global platform for networking and collaboration, the advancement of solutions to industry issues, and supporting driving sustainable market growth. MEF operates through a series of working groups, knowledge sharing, and ecosystem interactions. So please contact us for any further information on how to become part of the ongoing discussions. I can be reached on andrew@mobileecosystemforum.com. So today we're going to be hearing from the GSMA and supported by Cellusys. And today's webinar will run for about 45 minutes. It'll be recorded so you can share with colleagues through the email sent after the session. And there will also be a blog with links to follow after the webinar. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there's a button for Q&A, questions and answers, and you can submit questions to put to the panel. So please do ask questions throughout. We'll capture these, and we do appreciate your interaction and views. It makes it interesting for all of us. So I would now like to introduce today's panel, who will be exploring the issues with us. And I have Ian Smith of the GSMA and Stephen Fitzpatrick of Cellusys. So I'd like to hand over to Ian, first of all, to introduce himself and talk about his particular interest in the IoT security discussion today.
Okay, yes, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm Ian Smith, I'm the IoT Security Lead here at GSMA. I've been working at GSMA since 2011, a variety of topics. Started off working on the embedded SIM project, delivering the M2M embedded SIM specifications. Then moved on to work on connection efficiency guidelines, and more recently, last few years, on IoT security. And really, the focus of my presentation today will be purely on the IoT program here at GSMA. We have a number of other security activities that focus in on the sort of traditional network security tasks of our members. I won't be covering that. It's covered by a different group. So I'll be purely focusing on this new challenge that IoT security brings.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me this time. I'm delighted to be participating in another MEF webinar on the security, and particularly with a keen focus, obviously, on the IoT world. I'm currently Vice President of Sales within Cellusys IoT, and our key focus is obviously security within the actual IoT ecosystems. So I'm looking forward to engaging with Ian and Andrew throughout the webinar, and looking forward to seeing what the GSMA have been finding, and hopefully adding what we have seen in Cellusys as well, and through some of our enterprise clients as well, and trying to share and educate as much as we possibly can within the security sector of the IoT world.
Thank you, Stephen. So I'll now hand back to Ian, who's going to tell us about how operators are beginning to address security challenges and adopting industry standards in their security offerings. Over to you, Ian.
Yeah, okay, so thank you. So let me get that screen share. Okay, so let's move on through. So firstly, I mean, I don't want to assume everyone's familiar with the GSMA, so just a quick introduction to the organization. So we're a trade association representing mobile network operators, plus around 350 companies in the wider sort of mobile ecosystem. Fairly well-established trade body. I think most of you will come across us at some point. We run some very large events called Mobile World Congress, the famous one being in Barcelona, but also big shows now in Shanghai and Los Angeles. Obviously, you know, we now have over 8.8 billion mobile connections worldwide. This traditionally is built out of sort of traditional mobile markets of smartphones and other connected devices. But IoT is now potentially going to dwarf these figures. So within the GSMA, We have a number of programs, and one of the key programs is the IoT program, which I'm going to talk about today. These are the forecasts from the GSMA, based from our intelligence team, showing where we project the sort of IoT figures, connectivity figures to get to over the next few years. Pretty much every analyst comes out with a big figure, and we've got a similarly big figure. We're predicting, 25 billion connected devices by 2025. Now, one important thing to note here is that, of those devices, not every device is going to be cellular connected. In fact, the minority of those devices is likely to be cellular connected, so 3.5 billion devices connecting over cellular technologies. But still, it's a huge number and a huge opportunity to the GSMA membership. You can see the breakdown there as to which sort of segments we think will sort of lead the bigger volumes in the IoT field, with consumer electronics, smart home, connected industry, vehicles, and smart cities really, providing the large figures here. So there's a huge opportunity for our members. Now, how are we addressing this opportunity? Well, there are two parts to this. There's the connectivity, the basic connectivity that our members need to provide. So this is probably the primary focus of the IoT program initially, is to really drive out the connectivity. IoT services, yes, they can run over traditional 2G, 3G, 4G networks, but there are new types of network coming along that are specifically focused to satisfy the IoT market. These are based around the two new standards, LTE-M and narrowband IoT. And you can see here, over the last couple of years, we've made great strides in terms of driving the commercial launches of these new networking technologies. 115 now commercial launches around the world in 52 markets based on LTE-M and narrowband IoT. And this is really driving now those figures that we project in the future. It's a sort of nice world domination map showing the different technologies laid out. You can see most of the world, developed world now covered, and this whole map will be colored in the next few months. You can see the split in technologies here. You can see the sort of slight bias towards narrowband IoT in Europe and Asia, slight bias towards LTE-M in the Americas. But what we actually will expect to happen over the next few months and years is for both technologies to be deployed everywhere. You can see that's already happened in some major countries already. You see the US, Brazil, France, Germany, and so forth. Both technologies being deployed. One question I often get asked is, well, are these technologies competitors? They're not. They're complementary. In fact, the different technologies do tend to align with certain specific IoT use cases. So this is a great picture because it means that this vision of these 25 billion connected devices will become a reality because we have the network technologies in place to support the use cases. As I said, that's been the focus of the IoT program the last couple of years, but connectivity is great. And once you have connected things, it can enable some great services. But as soon as you have connectivity, the next challenge you almost immediately run into is a security challenge. Is it really safe to connect all these devices? And this then raises a kind of these kind of scenarios. This is a kind of picture of the connected city, and on the face of it, this picture looks quite complicated. Lots of devices in the shape of cars and sensors strapped to lampposts, and sensors in buildings, sensors in traffic lights, all communicating with one another. So you can see hundreds of thousands, millions of devices connecting over, many different types of interfaces, both local, cellular connectivity, connecting to all sorts of service platforms based in clouds all around the world. And this then paints quite a complex picture, and also paints a very large attack surface. And this is fundamentally the challenge that IoT presents. And on the face of it, the challenge looks fairly insurmountable. This complexity, how on earth are we going to make this secure? And this is the challenge that we set ourselves within the GSMA, is to, well, what can we do as a trade association to try and resolve this fairly complex picture down to a manageable issue that we can manage and we can resolve. It's also well noted that you know, the eye of the regulator is obviously on us as well. They see this picture, they see this smart city of the future, or whatever the IoT service might be, and they see the risks. They see the risks to their citizens, you know, risks to their privacy, physical, cyber physical risks, maybe when it comes to things like connected car and connected industries. And so, you know, we see a very much a regulatory push to address these security issues. And obviously, this makes an awful lot of sense. Here's a sort of sample of documents coming from various governments and sort of governmental institutions that you can find on the web. There are probably a dozen more that I could have put up here. What I would note about a lot of this guidance is, whilst it's useful and it's relevant, most of the guidance is actually quite high level. So you'll see sort of a code of conduct that may contain a dozen or so recommendations, all quite high level. Basically says these services should be secure, privacy should be respected, and so forth. So it lacks detail, and that's the other challenge here, is that we need the detail. So we need to get the complexity resolved down to something that's manageable, but also we need to define enough detail to actually produce secure solutions. This is, again, another objective that the GSMA set itself some time ago. So what do we do in practice? Well, physically, we assembled a project team called the IoT Security Project, and we resourced this team from the GSMA membership. So here you can see some of the operator members that joined the group. I'll probably get slapped on the wrist here because I've just focused on the operator members. An awful lot of other members from the ecosystem involved as well: network vendors, device vendors, cloud providers, and so forth. And the idea here was that we wanted a membership, a project team that reflected the end-to-end IoT ecosystem, not just the connectivity part, but the device part, server plant, and so forth. And we by and large achieved that. And the project group has been, say, established a couple of years ago, and it's been very active ever since. Let's come back to this question about the complexity issue. So that smart city picture looked awfully complicated, like an awfully large attack surface. But one of the first things we did in our project group is we actually defined a generic IoT architecture. Really, what we found is that when you boil an IoT service down, you typically end up with these building blocks. So be it an industrial IoT application, a smart city application, an automotive application. Yes, they all look physically very different and may do different, form different functions, but the building blocks are typically the same. So here we're trying to describe what we call the endpoint ecosystem, so the device, be it a car, robot, sensor, whatever it might be, typically or may not have some sort of user experience associated with it, some sort of interface. It's not necessarily always the case, but by and large it is. We then have the communication part, which is the mobile network, or it could be a fixed network, some kind of localized network, it doesn't matter. And then we have the back end, or the service ecosystem, which is maybe how hosted in the cloud or environment these days. So typically as a service platform, and again, some back-end APIs to provide perhaps a partner to link to certain partners, or to provide a user experience to the customer. And of course, there are management interfaces here too. The key thing here is that, you know, this picture does really simplify the whole situation. Yes, there's huge scale here, but when you boil it down to each solution, this is the architecture that typically lies behind it. And this is good because it effectively means we can then start looking at the attack models and define the attack models that sit around this architecture, because, you know, obviously there are only a limited set of interfaces, a limited set of components involved here. So we can go through step by step and define our attack models, and then to start defining our mitigations. So based on this architecture, we then started asking ourselves the sort of nitty-gritty type questions. Well, you know, in this architecture, how do we stop our components being cloned? How do we protect identities of the various entities involved here? How do we stop them being impersonated? How do we stop them being snooped on? How do you stop them being tampered with? How do you stop them interfaces, the local interfaces being hijacked, intercepted? How do you manage them securely? How do you ensure privacy? How do you protect the communications that are happening? And so forth. So, you know, the whole series of questions that anybody developing an IoT service needs to ask themselves. And they obviously need to ask these questions in the context of their particular service. And they need to obviously, more importantly, answer these questions. And based on those answers, implement mitigations within their particular service and in particular their particular solution. So with our group of experts, we defined our architecture. We went through and asked all the tricky questions anyone designing a service needs to ask themselves, and we documented our recommendations on the basis of the answer to these questions. And this is probably comes on to then the principal deliverable from the project team, and that's our security guidelines and our assessment tool. I'll cover the guidelines first. So the guidelines themselves, it's a document set, quite a comprehensive document set, and the guidelines define quite explicitly what security by design actually means. So those high-level government documents that I highlighted earlier, they define some very high-level principles. One of those principles is pretty much always your service shall implement security by design, and you should have end-to-end security, and you should implement privacy by design, these very high-level things. In this document set, we define quite explicitly at quite a granular level what that is, what that means from a product perspective. So the document set itself, in terms of its structure, you can see it has this kind of hierarchy to it. So we have a high-level document, a principles document, which mirrors those other documents and describes what you need to do, I guess, from an organizational level to address this challenge of IoT security. And the idea with this principles document is to develop a high-level document that really anybody can read. You know, you don't have to be a security expert. You can pick up this document, and on the basis of reading this 25-page document, have a basic understanding of how you need to approach this challenge of IoT security, what you need to do from an organizational sense to address this, what kind of processes you might need to follow, what existing standards exist there, both from an organizational security perspective and a product perspective, you might need to look to adopt. And now once you've done that, you know, once our idea here is, you know, maybe a CEO reads this document and he decides he's going to develop an IoT security strategy, he's going to employ an IoT security expert. But what guidance do you need to give that security expert? And this then comes to the middle layer, the security guidelines themselves. And we split this by the different entities. So we have one set of one document focused at the service ecosystem, one at the device ecosystem, and the third at the network part, a network component. And this is where the detailed recommendations lie for each of these different components. I'll describe a little bit about what's in those documents in the next slide. And underpinning this, we also have the security assessment, which I'll come to later, but that's a key part of this. You'll see that document set is being referenced by a number of organizations here. That's really good because you know, we're harmonizing effectively the detailed recommendations across all these different organizations. So whilst they made the high-level principles documents may be different, we're starting to see them all converge on the GSMA guidelines as a converged set of detailed design documents. So there's a kind of summary of the document set itself. It's a couple hundred pages, 12 attack models. So I mentioned earlier, we went through the architecture and we defined 10 principal attack models, so 12 ways that your IoT service is likely to be attacked. And then 85 detailed recommendations or mitigations to mitigate against those attack models. We have 3 worked examples in there. The guidelines are generic. You could apply them, we hope, to a vast array of IoT services, but just to show that in a bit more detail, we split, in fact, we've provided 3 worked examples based upon a wearable, a fitness tracker, another one based on a drone, connected drone, and a third one on an automotive, a connected car accessory. it's important to have those worked examples in the document, because the guidelines are supposed to be adapted to the specific product that you're designing. So, your product probably does not have to implement all 85 recommendations. In fact, it won't have to implement all 85 recommendations. The idea here is that you do a risk assessment on your product and you pick the recommendations and the mitigations based upon your product specification and the security target you want to achieve with your product. So you adapt it. It's a tool to be used and adapted based upon a risk assessment model. Other thing to note about the guidelines is that we don't reinvent any new security standards here. We try and reference existing standards wherever possible. So I mentioned that word, risk assessment. We don't reinvent a new risk assessment model here. There are many risk assessment models you can already use, well defined by the leading sort of standards bodies that are perfectly fit for purpose. We provide the information that you feed into the model to get the right answers, to get the right conclusions. We also don't reinvent cybersecurity. We focus in on specifically the challenges that IoT devices and services face. So it's typically, how do you ensure security, which security being, how do you ensure the availability of your service? How do you protect identities? How do you protect privacy? How do you ensure data integrity? And particularly in IoT devices, that are low complexity, low power, long life cycles, and physically accessible. Those are the new challenges that IoT brings. Traditional IoT security, we don't necessarily have to worry too much about low complexity and low power. We've got highly complex IT devices that we use, phones and laptops. They have pretty good power supplies and batteries these days, or we're prepared to recharge them pretty frequently. They don't have long life cycles. We change our phones and laptops every couple of years. And with our current IT assets, we pretty much protect them. We don't generally leave our phones lying around, our laptops lying around. IoT is obviously a completely different world. We have devices out there in cities that strapped to lampposts that are physically acceptable. They need to be there for 10 years. They need to run off a solar power supply, and they need to be cheap. So these are the key challenges that we focus in on, and all the recommendations relate to how we achieve security based on these challenges. As I mentioned, we fit into a existing process. We don't reinvent risk assessments or indeed design life cycles. We just take existing models and we try and fit in to your existing design processes wherever possible. I mentioned the worked examples already. So we've got 3 in the documents covering drones, automotive, and a wearable. So I won't describe those in too much more detail, but I will pick out one example to go through in a little bit more detail. So to pick out the vehicle use case. So in this use case, and again, all the details in the document, basically we have a scenario whereby we're trying to add a device into the car that plugs in through the ODP2 port. So it could be like an insurance tracker type device that you might be familiar with. And what we do is we go through that particular product and try and identify the risks associated with it. Now, obviously, there's some key risks that spring out with this kind of product. You don't want your ODP2 tracker to be impersonated. You don't want it to be attacked locally through side channels. If it is compromised, you probably want to know whether that device has been compromised. If there's a safety issue with that particular device, then to ensure safety over security is a key recommendation, particularly with automotive type applications. If your car is just about to crash, you probably don't really care about your privacy at that particular moment. You'd rather the car didn't crash. So you need to take on board any strategies there that put safety above security, and managing obviously users' privacy. If you've got, say, a tracking device in a car, then obviously there's a potential privacy issue here that your product needs to address. So in this hypothetical example, we've gone through our product, so we've highlighted some of the key risks, and then within the document sent against these key risks, we have some key recommendations. And one key recommendation that comes up time and time again to address many of these issues is this concept of having a trusted computing base within the endpoint device. And this kind of leads into the next part of my presentation, because one of the things that often get asked is, well, what's the key recommendation in your document set? And the key recommendation that I often raise is this concept of a trusted computing base within your endpoint device. Effectively, how do you trust your endpoint devices? On what basis do you trust your endpoint devices? How do you trust their identity? How do you trust you're actually authenticating the device that you want to authenticate? And our key recommendation is it comes down to having a trusted computing base. I'll just describe what exactly this means. So we use this tree analogy when it comes to trusted computing base, and we describe the trusted computing base as the roots of the tree. It's the thing that gives the tree the strength, the tree here being the IoT device. So the trusted computer base, in terms of what it actually is recommended to be a secure hardware element in the device. Within the secure hardware element, what we recommend is it contains the identity of the device, and it contains the cryptographic functions, or the key cryptographic functions that the device needs to undertake to mutually authenticate to its peers. And it also needs to contain the credentials that power those cryptographic functions. If you can implement this within some form of secure way within the device, ideally within secure hardware, you can basically implement this kind of seed of trust into the device. You don't have to necessarily then trust the whole device and all the software within the device. You can use this secure hardware element as that basis of trust, and that trust can then propagate from the secure hardware element to the other components within the device itself. What do I mean by that? So if you have this one piece of root of trust in the device, you can do things like validate the other software components within the device. You can mutually authenticate peers, both locally and remotely. You can securely provision and personalize the device on the basis of this secure hardware element. And you can potentially implement separation of duties. So I say credentials within the secure hardware element. It doesn't have to be one set of credentials. There could be many credentials. Having many credentials means that you potentially have multiple security domains within the device and compartmentalize the different functions within the device. And the power there is that then if one set of credentials is compromised, then the whole device isn't compromised. Potentially you can scale the credentials too, so you could have stronger credentials used to protect perhaps core functions, weaker credentials perhaps used to protect peripheral functions in the device. So it's a powerful concept. Why do we recommend this concept? Well, particularly within the mobile world, this basic principle has served us well in the shape of the SIM or the UICC. This has been the mobile industry's root of trust for many, many years, ever since the advent of digital networks. And it served us well in the past, and it serves us well into the future. And it's a concept that will live on well into 5G and beyond. And then, in essence, exactly what we've got here. We've got a protected piece of secure hardware containing the key credentials to enable, this case, network connectivity. There's absolutely no reason why you can't add extra applications into a SIM to power additional security functions within your IoT endpoint device. And that's something that we're getting a bit more into the kind of specifics about what the mobile industry can do, but leveraging the SIM for IoT security is a key value add that the mobile industry can potentially add here. There are also third-party secure elements, separate secure elements, proprietary secure elements out there. You're seeing most of the silicon vendors now providing this, and there's a good reason for it, because it underpins the same model. For cellular connected devices, all I would say is that, why in a cellular connected devices would you want multiple secure elements? Every secure element is going to cost money, both in terms of hardware and management. If you have a cellular connected device, it's got a SIM potential there to use it for more than just the connectivity security. There are many other, that's one key recommendation, this root of trust recommendation. There are many other within the document set, which I won't have time to go through. So I've just tried to signify that with all these boxes on the display. I can only reiterate that it's a comprehensive document set. So let's just move on to the security assessment. So talked a lot about the guidelines, and guidelines are great, but guidelines aren't much use if nobody follows them. And the only way you're going to know if somebody's followed the guidelines is if somebody's done an assessment and can prove that they've implemented the recommendations. So that raises kind of questions. You know, if I have a service, I've taken some use cases, I've put together some building blocks, I've taken some security best practices, and I've implemented some security features. Now, the fundamental question is, do I then have a secure service? Well, the answer is no. You have to do a security assessment. You can do this maybe yourself, but even better, perhaps get somebody else to do it for you, separate team or a separate organization. And the security assessment was what the GSMA has produced. In essence, let me just go back to the last slide. Now, this is a way to assess you or your suppliers' organizational procedures, security, service platform security, communications security, device security, and so forth. I mean, in essence, it's a great big long checklist. So, you know, I mentioned we have 85 recommendations in the guidelines. We've basically tabulated the 85 recommendations into a document, and we put control statements against each one. The recommendation itself may leave a degree of ambiguity. So with each of the control statements, we've tried to reduce the possibility of any ambiguity in the response. In fact, the control statement should, by and large, yield a clear yes/no answer. Have you done this? Have you done that? There's always a possibility for a partial response. There's always a notes column if you need to fill it in, but effectively a nice binary response to all of the recommendations in the guidelines. And the power here is that, you know, if you put this in a supply chain model, you know, you're procuring a component of an IoT solution. You can get all your suppliers to do the assessment, and you can compare them based on a common framework, can score them based on a common framework, and hopefully you can select your supplier based not just only on the spec of the product or the cost of the product, but also the security properties of the product. And again, from the supplier's perspective, if you're offering a component of an IoT service or a complete IoT service, and you're trying to sell that to your customers, you can do one assessment and you can share the results of the assessment with all your customers in a standard way. And obviously you can then claim, look, I've done an assessment based on an industry scheme. So this is something I've created, not just highlighting the security features I want to highlight. This is an industry scheme. So I've done an assessment based on something that's fair and impartial. We're getting now quite a number of security labs offering this as a service. Obviously, not too many organizations have the skill set to do quite a comprehensive security assessment themselves. It'd be great if they did, but many organizations would like to use a third party or partner with somebody to do this. So you can see here a load of labs using and offering this particular service to their customers. You can see some operators listed here, 11 parties owned by Telefonica. You can see Orange listed here. This is because the network operators themselves are actually offering these security labs. They're building up IoT security labs, offering these services to their customers. Obviously, you know, maybe they're trying to sell connectivity primarily, but as part of that service offering, they're also offering to do security assessments for their customers in their own security labs. And obviously lots of other labs cotton on to the fact that IoT to be a success, people are going to want security assessments done, and these services are going to become really important. If you are a lab, if you're listening and you are a lab and you want to offer the security assessment based on the GSMA document and you'd like us to promote that, happy to do that, just let me know. Okay, so just to wrap up this presentation now, talked a lot about security guidelines, talked about security assessments. I mean, one question you might ask me is, well, what are your GSMA members actually doing? It's one thing to have all these tools. Are they actually using them? Well, picture 12 months ago wasn't particularly great, to be honest. We published the guidelines some time ago, but to get our own members to do this was quite a challenge. You know, it does take time, effort, money, resources to do this work. But the good news is that June last year, we actually got a public commitment from our members, some of our big members, to use these resources and start following the guidelines and doing security assessments. So it's great that they made this statement to say they would do this. But more importantly, more recently, we have a report actually detailing what they have done. So 14 case studies in this document detailing how 14 operator members of the GSMA, how they've used the security assessment, what products they tested, what challenges they faced, what issues they had to overcome, explains the time and effort that they took to implement the assessment, to do the assessment, and demonstrates the business value they got from it as well. By the end of this process, we had quite a few senior people within these organizations, non-technical CEOs, asking for the assessment to be done. So no longer having internal teams trying to sell this concept, get the resources, but actually having senior people request it be done and ensuring it be done to satisfy the need of ultimately of their customers. So that's a really good case study to read if you're sort of interested to find out what the real value is, the business value is to performing security assessments. Okay, second to last slide before I wrap up. And I mentioned these guidelines earlier, these policy documents that were being published. One good thing about the documents is that they all reference the GSMA guidelines and GSMA assessment. So whilst we have these different guidelines coming out from different organizations, we do have potentially a path to harmonization in that they all reference our guidelines. They also reference some other groups' guidelines. We're not the only show in town. But the key here is that from a detailed level, we're seeing some harmonization here. The detailed recommendations that lie behind all of these documents are the same. The GSMA guidelines and the guidelines from a few other industry groups. And this really plugs the gap. You know, we might see some certification coming in future. You're probably aware of the Cybersecurity Act that's come into law in Europe. Doesn't have any teeth at the moment because there's no certification schemes yet being defined within it. But in a couple of years, we might have certification schemes, and we hope those schemes are going to be based on the GSMA guidelines or something very close to the GSMA guidelines and the guidelines from other industry groups working in this space. So hopefully we have enough here to plug the hole until perhaps some certification comes along in a couple of years' time. And that's my presentation. They're my details. Happy for you to get in touch. But now I've been talking for a while, so I'm going to hand back to Andrew. I don't know if you've had any questions come in from the audience, but I'll hand back to Andrew to see what we've got.
Thank you, Ian, for that very comprehensive discussion on IoT security. I'll certainly take away a lot of messages from there. We have had some questions come in, but before I launch into the questions, I'd just like to hand over to Stephen to get his reaction to some of the points you've raised.
Yeah, absolutely. Great presentation, Ian. It's exactly what we're championing as well. It's exactly what we're seeing as a requirement in the markets, and it's very, very, very interesting, the fact that you're putting down principles and guidelines and then backing that up with statements as well. And the more the market and our partners and all really embrace this type of thinking, the better, the more secure, and the more future-proofing and less insecure the IoT world is going to be. So well done on that, and really interesting. And I have seen the report, and I'm going to dive back into it again after some of the points that you've actually raised there as well. So it's very, very, very relevant, and well done to the GSMA.
Thank you, Stephen. We've had a couple of questions in. The first question is, do you have an example of a successful product running on NB or Cat-M?
Yeah, I've seen a number of smart meters being tested and evaluated in Ireland, Denmark, I think the Netherlands and Sweden as well. The products really do work very, very well, but unfortunately, the one drawback is that the networks aren't fully ready to roll these out nationwide or pan-Europe or whatever from there. But as a technology, I've seen it working, and it works extremely well within the smart meter side of things.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, I showed the map earlier showing the narrowband IoT and LTE coverage. Obviously, that showed a kind of global view, but obviously, a national level, The rollouts are at different stages. I mean, the network operators are rolling out these networks obviously as quickly as they can. There are obviously sometimes localized issues that delay full national rollout. But these issues are being resolved very quickly. I mean, if I painted that picture to you 12 months ago, I'd only be able to show very few countries with any launches. Now, you know, over 115 and increasing every day. So whilst we may have localized issues in certain territories today, you know, the picture is advancing very quickly. We will have rafts of coverage, global coverage from these networks in a very short period of time. And obviously, if you're looking to deploy, you know, an IoT solution like a smart metering solution that's going to be in place for 20 years, you know, the attraction is that these networks are going to stick around. You know, these technologies, they flow into the 5G standards. So when I'm asked, well, you know, what happens when 5G comes along? Does it supersede the technologies? No, these are 5G technologies. So the advantage of these networks is they're going to be here in the long term.
Thank you. The next question, is core network vulnerability covered? We're just reading a lot in the press at the moment about 5G vulnerability in Huawei. So I guess that's one for Ian.
Oh, wow, thank you. Someone's raised this. Someone's been reading the papers. It's hard to escape this particular issue at the moment. So again, focusing on IoT, I've not really focused on the network aspects. It's covered by our network security team here at GSMA. So I'm not the best person to answer that particular question. All I can say is that the GSMA is developing a scheme called the NESAS scheme, Network Equipment Security Assurance Scheme. It's a scheme we're developing in coordination with ETSI. So ETSI effectively defining the requirements. So it's coming out of a national standards body. And the GSMA effectively will be running the scheme based upon those ETSI requirements. The scheme is about to launch, so we hope to launch the scheme in the next few months. And it's specifically focused at network equipment vendors.
Thank you. And there's a couple of other questions I have. What are the principal security challenges with most IoT services? Is it securing the device, the cloud, the network, or all of these?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, what became very quickly apparent when we're developing our security guidelines is the new challenge, I'd say, is with IoT devices. And again, it's because, you know, with IoT security, we tend to take a lot of the security work and models from the existing IT world. You know, the models that we're using in the past to secure smartphones or to secure laptops and sort of traditional IT services. But with IoT, as I've mentioned before, you know, the devices themselves are not traditional IT devices. They're simple, they're cheap, they're low power. They typically have to live a long time, maybe 10 plus years, physically accessible to attackers, devices that people can buy, take apart, hack locally. And these attack scenarios are not the typical attack scenarios of the present day IT world. And this is where the principal challenge lays. So this is why, you know, we believe that reducing the attack surface of those devices by trying to condense the security functions within a secure hardware element, could be a software element, but we strongly preach that there should be a hardware element. You can condense the security functions within a device into a small footprint that's physically tamper-proof, physically resilient to attack, potentially uses cryptographic functions based around things like symmetric cryptography rather than asymmetric cryptography. Then you can really reduce the size, footprint, complexity of the device and still maintain very high levels of security, and security that projected to last for many years into the future. And for the mobile industry, we can bring a lot of expertise because that's fundamentally what we did with mobile phones and smartphones today, is that we have a very simple root of trust in those devices that then propagates that trust into the product as a whole, which means that large chunks of the product can be, in essence, less trusted and are less attractive to the attacker as a result.
So I think a question for both of you now: is there sufficient security expertise out there?
Absolutely. I believe there were, best practices actually come out now in terms of where people are actually understanding where their vulnerabilities really lie. There is certainly, plenty of companies and products out there to, really secure the ecosystem, whether that's from the cloud, the device, the SIM, and really, been addressing that and understanding it. I think the main barrier to this securing the networks was a lack of understanding, a lack of education, and then also a lack of wanting to spend on product as well. What we were finding out is that as Ian was just saying, was there was a low cost to market product, and a lot of these products were falling flat on their face with vulnerabilities and being backdoors or whatnot into security breaches and so on. So yeah, there is very, very much an awful lot of work gone into this now. It's about educating people now and bringing people really through a proper journey of getting a secure network and a secure device, especially now that IoT devices are now being monetized for revenues rather than just being there for a handy, quick, easy use work or to fix an actual problem. They're now out there to actually drive revenues for a lot of enterprises and clients out there.
Yeah, I mean, I concur completely what Stephen just said. Absolutely. I mean, the picture's changed. I mean, in terms of the skill set, I've seen it change sort of before my eyes, really. I remember going to an automotive conference a couple of years ago. In fact, it was an industrial IoT conference, and it was difficult to find, big industrial players there that really had firm views on security, how to approach security. And I guess perhaps they were attending these conferences to sort of find out a bit more about the challenges and find out, and develop their own internal strategies. But when I go to conferences now, which have different segments represented, it's amazing the level of knowledge and understanding coming from the different industries. Industries that weren't connected a few years ago really do understand the challenges, the issues. Maybe they don't have the full teams in place that they feel comfortable with, but there's been a real radical shift in expertise within multiple industries over the last few years. I think the guidelines that we've produced have helped bring people up to speed, and definitely people are addressing these challenges head on now.
Thank you. So do you think a standard for IoT security will be developed, and who's going to do this and by when?
Yeah, I mean, we're aware of a few initial standards. So I mentioned the ETSI standard a few times. They effectively taken the UK government's consumer code of conduct for IoT, and they've turned that into an ETSI standard. It's not a binding standard at the moment, but I think ETSI are looking to convert that to a binding standard. So that's a first step towards a standard for IoT. NIST in the US again produced some draft guidelines recently and did a consultation. We're looking at those being published later in the year. So we are starting to see the standards communities develop standards, but they are still quite high level, not so detailed. But next step could be that they then go on to develop the detail that sits behind those initial high level standards. Really depends on the appetite of those groups to do that. Other aspect here, NISA obviously has a new mandate under the Cybersecurity Act to develop some certification schemes. We don't know what schemes, what they'll focus on, but we believe that may focus on IoT, some capacity, maybe consumer IoT. Ultimately, if they define a certification scheme, then that will be one of the key standards, in essence, that the industry then needs to follow. So yeah, it's started, it's in progress, but still got plenty of work to do to have real detailed, concrete standards in place for IoT.
Thank you. I'll just ask one final question, or more of an observation than a question for you. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to people listening in today to take away from this session, what would it be? So I think I'll ask Stephen that question first.
Yeah, I suppose for me, always consider the security element of the product. You know, obviously performance is going to be key in the product, but also, you know, consider the you know, the security element in there. If you're building a product from obviously scratch, you're obviously going to look at everything from your antenna to your battery and the performance within there. But, you know, the key part here is obviously to make sure that the device is secure and have it secure in the right way. And, you know, following the good guidelines that the GSMA are setting. And then hopefully we get some certification rules happening and rolling out over the coming years, so that, you know, the X billions of devices that we will have will actually be secure. And obviously that'll help the market grow.
Thank you. And Ian?
Yeah, I'd concur with that. You know, obviously I would say recommend you to look at our resources and use them. Like I say, it will prepare you very well for the certification schemes that are coming. I mean, they still might be 18 months, 2 years away, but it's obviously, you know, and everyone's interested to be on a good footing for when that does arrive. I suppose one of the other point is that we've talked a lot about IT security. We've painted maybe a complex picture about security, but, you know, these issues are resolvable. It's perfectly feasible to create really secure IoT services. You just need to give it a little bit of thought. It's going to cost you a little bit of money, but you know, the mitigations are there and the solutions are there. And also some really good frameworks out there. You know, you don't have to invent all of this stuff yourself. There are some companies, I won't mention who they are, offer some really good IoT frameworks these days that take a lot of these headaches away. Some GSMA members, some non-GSMA members. So, you know, I urge you to look out there. You know, the picture, the landscape in terms of the solutions has changed drastically over the last few months. Some really good frameworks that are out there now that are only ripe to be used.
Thank you. So I'm now going to wrap up. I've had a request, so whether the slides will be available after the webinar, and I think that's something for Ian, whether he's happy to share the slides.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. As I said, we'll be writing a blog of the webinar, and the recording of the webinar will be available on our website in the next couple of days. So I'd like to thank Stephen and Ian for participating as experts in today's webinar, and I'd like to thank webinar participants for joining us today. On that note, I'll say goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day.